Hi, Ty.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for hopping on this conversation with me. I'm so excited to get to know you better and to kind of share you with our audience.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on. We've talked a lot in the past couple of years. It's great to get on a video and kind of get to know each other better.
Yeah, and just to have some face-to-face interaction. For those of you listening, Ty is the owner and founder of Bare Nut Butter, which is actually where we get the almond butter for all of our products, and cashew butter now with our pumpkin spice bars. So we kind of follow each other on Instagram, and just with our business dealings, I knew that he would be a great person to talk to because, I actually don't know that much about you just based on kind of what I see on your Instagram, but obviously you are very into the wellness side of things, and kind of being in Denver, you get that firsthand. So
Mhm.
why don't you just start out by introducing yourself and telling a little bit about your background and where you got to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, it's great to see what you've done over the past couple of years. I
Mhm.
remember like we kind of started out and it was just like, very small amounts of almond butter here and there. You were testing
Yeah.
some products and your growth has really been stratospheric over the past couple of years, which is
Thank you.
really encouraging to see. So, I guess and I really know kind of where you've come from because we kind of did the same thing with our
Mhm.
own business. It's obviously
Yeah.
now kind of a larger scale, almond butter and cashew butter and walnut butter, all the nut butter kind of
Yeah.
distribution centers. But in the past, we started as a Kickstarter. We were working out of a commercial kitchen. We had our own kind of niche line product, like this multi-nut and seed butter. And so it's really cool to see what you've done. And, I think you
Mhm.
only have incredible growth moving forward. So I guess a little bit about
Thank
me.
you.
I've kind of been in the health, wellness, fitness industry for about 10 years now. I was pre-med in undergrad. And it really kind of was applying a lot of what I was learning in class to my own personal life in terms of fitness and nutrition, and kind of really digging into the research and taking what I was learning in, my biochem or my genetics class and trying to apply it to my own personal life. So a lot of experimentation in college. And I ultimately decided not to go to medical school.
Mm.
Got into a couple and just was like, I don't know if this is right for me. I kind of have more like an entrepreneurial spirit. And so eventually founded a couple companies kind of in that space. And so I had one kind of metabolic wellness company. We focused a lot on blood sugar management and things like that. And, I co-founded a company that was kind of this cannabinoid skincare product. We actually was a non-cannabis cannabinoid skincare product. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. So really ahead of the time.
Yeah.
And we were taking kind of these terpenes and cannabinoids out of these very exotic plants that were not of cannabis origin, and
Mhm.
kind of basically creating a formula around kind of eczema and psoriasis for those. And then I of course founded Passion Nut Butters LLC with my partner who's also named as Sarah.
Uh-huh.
And that was a really cool experience. As I mentioned, like we did a Kickstarter. We both just had a love for nut butters, and we were like, we don't really love what's on the market right now. So we just started buying some nuts in bulk and grinding nut butters in our house, and that grew
Yeah.
to kind of blending different nuts and seeds and adding MCT oil and whey protein and cinnamon and things like that, and turned into this product. And everyone's like, oh, this is amazing. You guys should make a business out of it. So we did a Kickstarter. We raised like $12,000. We bought this food processor that was like taller than me. And we had a commercial kitchen, and we were doing that whole thing, and quickly realized that it really wasn't like scalable how we were doing it. And
Mm.
so we kind of moved into like this bulk distribution space, because we think that there's just a lot of like underserved small businesses that they
Mhm.
want a really high quality product, and they don't have the time to be going out there and kind of vetting different distributors and finding all these different kind of channels of food products to make their
Right.
own product the best it can be. And so that's what we do now. We sell 15-pound buckets of nut butter, and it's all natural. It's just the nut, or the nut and a little bit of salt if you want the
Yep.
salted version. And really just kind of like trying to embrace this idea that food is something that is inherently central to everyone's life, and it really needs to
Mhm.
be better. And so trying to offer the best possible product at a very fair and reasonable price, because as a lot of these natural products are just so incredibly expensive that
Yeah.
it's not attainable for most people. And so that's kind of Bare Nut Butter in a whole. We're launching peanut butter soon, so that's really exciting. And as you mentioned,
Yes.
we have almond butter and cashew butter. Anything that's a nut that grows on a tree or in the ground,
Yeah.
we're grinding it. So that's kind of where we are. And I guess that's like I guess what people don't know about me is that's kind of like what I do for like 50% of my time. I actually work in biotech professionally. Yeah, so I work for a company, it's called Rootine.co. And I was like one of the founding members of the team. And we do basically healthcare personalization based on biometric data. So we have at-home testing, that we have both a DNA test, we have a blood test. We're rolling out multiple new blood tests, and we basically take that data. We have this really cool algorithm that we've developed that really kind of layers in lifestyle data on top of genetic data, on top of blood data, and generates like incredibly bespoke nutrient personalization formulas for everyone. So you're really getting exactly what you need to optimize your own biology. And so that's kind of what I do professionally, and really interested to kind of see where the industry goes in the next 5 years, because personalization really is the future of not only healthcare, but also just kind of the wellness industry. It's one of those things where if you're in either of these industries and you're not thinking about how you can personalize products to the individual human, you're going to be out of business in the next couple of years. I mean, the supplement industry, this is something that's already happened. Pharmaceuticals, it's been happening. So it's a really cool space to be in.
Yeah, that is just absolutely fascinating, and not something I knew about you actually until I was kind of looking at your Instagram before we hopped on here, and I did see that in your profile. So I definitely want to get into that more, as well as Bare Nut Butter a little bit more. But I want to back up just a little bit and unpack some things from your background. Something that you mentioned about, being pre-med in college, and I am particularly interested in hearing, like, because as a holistic health coach, and kind of having my hand heavily in that functional health side of things, and you kind of hear as a health coach, right? Like doctors get 0 minutes of nutrition in training. And so I'm curious, like in your undergrad studies, was nutrition something that came up, or was that something that you kind of peeled away, that you were like, I want to see how I can, affect my own physical health based on other things that I'm learning in the field?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in undergrad, not at all. I mean, that's just not really something that's covered in like the pre-med curriculum. I know that I would say of my like 6 closest friends, 5 of them are now doctors practicing. So I'm very kind of familiar with what happens after med school as well, and kind of can talk to a large degree on that. And I can say that there's very little nutrition there as well. I have friends that are both MDs and DOs, so kind of both sides of the doctor spectrum. And there's maybe a little bit more education nutritionally on the DO side, but there's it's very minimal, and it's essentially absent on the MD side, from what I've heard at least. And it's really one of those things that at least the high performing physicians that I work with professionally, they understand that it's kind of it's a point of data that's lacking from the curriculum. And if they really want to be kind of, especially if they want to be on the functional side of things, it's something they have to go out of their way and get a fellowship in, metabolic nutrition, or kind of educate themselves on the side, because it's just not baked into what being a healthcare professional is, at least as far as a doctor is concerned.
Right, exactly. So do you think that this interest that you had in your own physical health and nutrition, I know you said you were entrepreneurial, so that kind of influenced you parting ways from going to med school, but do you think that played a role too, in the fact that you wanted to do something a little bit more in wellness, even if it was subconscious? Do you think that influenced your decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I was reading a ton, and it was just like, it was so apparent in the studies, in the literature, that lifestyle plays such a critical role in chronic disease. And that was like always my passion. I was like, how do we solve chronic disease in America? It's such a big issue. And like, it was just so incredibly clear that like, there's a preventative approach it's relatively straightforward, and it's going to take 80% of the chronic diseases off the table. Like that was kind of the number that kept kind of recurring, is that there's this kind of 80-20 mentality in chronic disease, and 80% of it is attributed to lifestyle. And so I was like looking at this, and I was like, wow, like lifestyle, like what does that mean? And you can really break it down into kind of 4 pillars of lifestyle, and that's nutrition, sleep, stress management, and exercise. And I think like, the fitness industry and like the kind of nutrition industry, like people get that, like they understand like they need to diet and exercise if they want to be healthy, right? But I don't think anyone knows what nutrition means. And like, it's so incredibly, it's such a contentious topic. You have people screaming on one side and screaming on the other side, plants are bad or animal products are bad. And like, it's just such a contentious topic that the average consumer has no idea what they should be doing. And the same thing kind of for exercise. Like, is it endurance? Is it lifting weights? Like, everyone is just like, has such a hot take on these topics, and there's no real like rational thought on a lot of these things. And then like, I think the average person has no idea what stress management means. They don't really know that sleep is such an incredibly large factor in your long-term health. And so like, I was like looking at all this stuff and I was like, wow, like I'm not going to learn any of this in med school. And I'm certainly probably not going to be able to practice kind of these things unless I take kind of more specialized, functional approach, which is definitely an up and coming thing in the medical field. It already is a fully established, kind of sector in healthcare, but it's just one of those things that I just looked at the data and I was like, I don't think I'm going to be doing what is really impactful for the average person. And so that's kind of why I took a different approach and said, can I change lives through business instead of actually like practicing medicine? And so that's what I'm doing now.
I love that. It seems you're right where you should be. So was your family health conscious? Like, did you grow up that way? Or is this something that like was almost like after you kind of left the nest, so to speak, you discovered for yourself?
We were always health conscious. But like looking back, what that meant was just so incredibly wrong, just because like, my parents grew up in the time of, fat is bad. Like, go eat this like manufactured butter that turns out to be terrible for you because it has all these like, trans fats and things like that. So my parents they tried to steer me in the right direction, but like their methodology was so flawed because of the flawed information coming out of kind of what the government was saying we shouldn't be eating. So, I was never a kid that grew up with, the sugary cereals and things like that. And I never got the pizza rolls or bagel bites or things like that.
You missed out, Tye. You missed out.
I was the kid that went over to my friend's house and just cleared out the freezer. I was like, oh, let's do it. Like, I don't get any of this stuff at home. So they certainly tried, but I think once I kind of took ownership of my own health in college, and had the opportunity to kind of eat whatever I want, whenever I want. I definitely tried to be very conscious with what I was putting in my body. And, when you're at college, you don't have a ton of options. It's kind of what's available to you wherever you're eating at. But you definitely have the choice, right? You can make smarter choices. And I certainly did that. And I got really into fitness in college because I was a lifetime athlete. I've always played sports. Multi-sport athlete my entire life. And then I chose not to play a sport in college because I wanted to focus exclusively on my education because I was pre-med and that was, was most important to me. And I felt like super empty, not having kind of a sport to fall back on. So I got really into kind of fitness and just like working out a lot, running a lot, doing 5Ks, all sorts of things like that. And so that all kind of, folded into this idea of, how can I best support my body nutritionally and athletically and all sorts of things. And so I got really into kind of like looking at the biochemistry of certain supplements and things like that. And just kind of really started this journey of, self-education that really took hold kind of my junior, senior year, and then really took hold, the next 4 years after school, just learning everything I possibly can about everything I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I feel as if like, that's a good message for people because I think people need to feel empowered to take matters into their own hands when it comes to their health. And, I think to your point about all of the conflicting information, I think nutrition it's a science, but it's actually one of the only sciences where different theories can apply to different people just because of bioindividuality.
Yes.
And so I think that that's really important for people to hear is that you really have to be your own advocate and you have to learn and you have to experiment. Like you're never like the way that I eat now is completely different than the way that I ate 4 years ago, just because I understand that it's kind of a continual journey. And one day like a food might stop working for you, or you're going to go through a period in your life where stress management is more important, or you're going to go through different cycles of exercises that feels good in your body. So I think that you're just like a living example of that. And I know you mentioned earlier the 4 pillars, and I want to get into those specifically and your philosophy around each one. But I also want to ask, like, I think in Denver, you probably don't deal with this as much, but here on the East Coast, it's a little bit more traditional, and how, like, I think in health coaching, and when people wanted to get healthier or they wanted to make these changes in their lives, like, one of the biggest obstacles was friends, family, and the people around them didn't have the same mindset. So is this something that, like, you know, you surround yourself with people who feel the same way about health and fitness? Are people open to kind of like hearing everything that you've learned? And what advice do you have for people who might come in contact with those naysayers, who kind of make that health journey more difficult for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to start by saying, the individuality piece you just kind of brought up is so important, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not really addressed in traditional healthcare.
Right.
And so I am a huge advocate of people, especially the younger you are, if you have any like additional income that you can invest into learning about your own body, I think there is no better time to do it than right now.
Yes.
And the younger you are, the more time you have with that information, so like I've taken every test possible,
Yeah.
and I really think that, like, if you're in your 20s and you have a couple $1,000s, if you can spend that on testing, genetic testing, blood testing, metabolomic testing, all sorts of different things to kind of understand what makes your body tick and what makes you
Mm-hmm.
different than someone else, it's so important to do it now, because then you can apply what you learn for the rest of your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. And like those little tiny tweaks that you make,
Yeah.
like maybe you're, highly reactive from like an IgG standpoint to a certain food. And like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know that, but you kind of always feel bad. And like, but you take that test and you learn that, then you just remove that food for like the rest of your life. And all of a sudden, like that little tiny change, like it just has like the amplitude of benefit over 30 years is incredible. So that's like kind of where I like to start, is like, if there's ever a time to experiment and learn about yourself, do it now. Now, on the
Yeah.
experimentation side, like if you don't know what you're doing, please work with someone that does. This is where health
Mm-hmm.
coaching comes in. This is where health professional comes in. Like, I think this whole biohacking like movement is really
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it's become very mainstream. Whereas, 4 years ago, biohackers were like people like me that like, but nowadays biohackers is like everyone kind of identifies as a biohacker. And like, there's a lot of people that I think are doing semi-dangerous things that don't really know what they're doing. So I guess like my takeaway message of that is like, if you don't feel like you're fully educated and don't feel like you can do this yourself, find someone that can, because there
Mm-hmm.
are plenty of people out there that can help guide you and make sure you're making smart decisions. Moving on to kind of what you asked me about originally. I think that there's kind of two journeys, there's really one that happens when you kind of reach your breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like your health is just so poor and you struggled with so many things that you finally are like, I'm going to take ownership of this. I'm going to do whatever the heck it takes to make it work. Right. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people that have like digestive issues fall into this category, right? Like they don't know why they don't feel well, but they know they don't feel well, like digestively all the time. What's going on? I can't figure it out. I've tried all sorts of diet. And they finally just get to a point where like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And
Yeah.
I'm going to start like figuring this out. And then it's kind of like a one man or one woman journey from there on out. And it's just kind of like you start out and you're going to do it yourself. You're going to read, you're going to learn, you're going to test, whatever it may be. And then hopefully you find a community that supports you along the way. I think the other option is really surrounding yourself with people that are trying to better themselves and kind of like
Mm-hmm.
getting this like tag along benefit, and just finding people that are healthier than you are or are looking to be healthier, and kind of getting the the ownership that comes with that and the motivation and the accountability that comes with that. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a really powerful approach as well.
Yes.
The literature is very clear that like people that exercise together exercise longer, people that diet together diet better. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can find someone in your life that is meaningful to you and is going to be there by your side and kind of you can bounce feedback off of them and they can hold you accountable for your decisions, it's definitely very impactful. So there's no really like kind of right way to do it. It's just that you do it and you
Yeah.
stick to it. I think one of the things that one of my kind of mentors and business partners. His name's Dr. Javier Diaz. He runs Ethos Wellness Pharmacy down in Miami, Florida. He's kind of a functional pharmacist, which is kind of a very unique situation because, pharmacy is typically, they're pill pushers, but he has all these fellowships in metabolic nutrition and anti-aging and regenerative therapies and things like that. So he has this kind of like very cool dual approach where he understands everything that medications are doing and that it's a tool to use, but he also has all these like very cool opinions on how to kind of manipulate biology with environment and lifestyle and things like that. And one of the things that we always said was like simple is sustainable. Like when we were developing products and we were developing strategies for kind of metabolic maintenance and blood sugar management, there's so many like crazy cool things that you can do to manipulate your biology, but so many of them are just unattainable for the average person. Like it's just, it's so much time and effort and money to do them that it's just like, why are we even talking about this? So our like key motto is simple is sustainable. Like and sustainability is really the key to real health improvement because everyone wants those overnight solutions and those quick fixes. It does not exist. Like biology, it changes slowly. So if you can't find something that is sustainable, that you're willing to do for weeks and months and years, there's really no point in doing it. And so it really comes down to like, what is sustainable for you? You have to like it, and it's got to be pretty easy to do on a daily basis. So that's kind of another like tip that I give people is, if you're starting out on your health journey or you're trying to solve a problem that you're having, like a lot of times, like the big, like sexy solutions that people are trying to sell you are incredibly complex. Do these like super long, like rigorous plans, and they're expensive and things like that. Like a lot of the time though, the things that are really going to kind of move the needle for you are these very small tweaks in your life and just sticking to them.
Yeah. And, I think what I'm hearing from you, which is so great, is like, there's almost like this middle way. Like, I think for the people who are extremists and, devote their life to their health, I mean, I think on that side of the spectrum, you kind of sacrifice, not like, I don't want to say like living a normal life, but like aspects of, maybe a social life or whatever. And that can be very extreme. But then there's the other side where it's like, you want that quick fix, but that's not realistic either. So it seems as if there's just this middle way, this more balanced way to achieve. And it's just about those little things that you can incorporate to make it more of a lifestyle and not like a plan. And that small changes every day can, lead to the big results.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with either approach. And there's nothing wrong with the middle approach either. Like I am 100% an extremist. Like I was, someone told me in like a sophomore year in college, like it's impossible to build muscle on a vegan diet. And that's just simply incorrect. Like, so I was like, I'll prove it. Like, so I was vegan, strict vegan, didn't touch a single animal product for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And was like 6% body fat, like 195 pounds of just pure muscle, was deadlifting like 500 pounds. And purely because this guy was like, you can't do it. And so I was like, I will do it. So I am definitely famous. Like
challenge accepted. Yeah,
I will go to the ends of the world to like prove a point. And, I was keto for 3 years, didn't break it once. Like back when keto wasn't a thing, this was like 5 years ago. And before like keto became mainstream, and really helped kind of try to like guide a lot of companies to create products and things like that. I was probably one of the first people to do like, ketone esters, those extremely expensive product. And I spent a lot of money on them because I thought it was really cool and really performance enhancing for people that were on a ketogenic diet or on kind of a mixed carb, high fat diet. And so I've done a lot of things that are definitely considered extreme, especially from like a nutritional standpoint. There's nothing wrong with being extreme, but I think it's important to understand like where you should be extreme at. There are also points where you need to balance that with like simplicity. And so like now a lot of what I do is kind of built on like, I had like 5 years of just doing really extreme stuff and spending a lot of money on like trying to understand my body and what works for me. So I was extreme, but now I like take those learnings and I apply it to like kind of like simple, sustainable solutions that work for me. And I'm much less extreme. And like, I think a lot of people talk about like the social aspect of dieting, and it's incredible. Like it's one of those things you kind of just like brush off until you really experience it. And like being vegan is very socially restricting. Being strict keto is very socially restricting. Like you go out to eat with friends and you're just sitting there a lot of the time, because like
Right.
at least 5 years ago, granted, a lot has changed in the kind of the restaurant environment in that time, because now they're catering to keto people, they're catering to vegan people, but like you would just sit there and like everyone's drinking a beer and having some French fries. And you're just like, so what's up? You know, and that's,
and I'm the person that would be like, I don't even want to go. Like that's, I mean, unfortunately, that's just how I am, being an introvert too, but you know, it's just, so I think you're exactly right. Like it can be very restricting in that way. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just one of those things that you have to figure out what works for you and what works for your like cohort of friends. Like if 20 of your friends are all just like super data nerds and you love spending money on testing and you love supplements and you love being strict keto and you love all of these things and you can like hang out and you can go deep fry bacon together, like awesome. Like if that's what you want to do, go for it. And it's probably not socially restricting to you because your entire, you know, fold of friends is all doing the same thing. But if you're not, it might make sense to find something that's a little more middle ground so you can still like partake in life and have friends and have the flexibility to go do things. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's your life, live it how you want. I think that there's like a different solution for everyone and not everyone has to kind of be the same level of like social. So whatever works for you.
Yeah. So I was going to save this question for later, but I'm now super curious because you've obviously swung from vegan to keto, which is, I mean, I would characterize them on two different sides of the spectrum. So how do you eat now?
I eat now for whatever I'm doing performance related, I would say. And like whatever I'm trying to do from a body composition standpoint, and kind of, those are really the big things. I think that keto is a tool. I'm not a huge, I don't have any strong opinions on veganism other than I think that it's like lacking some critical nutrients. I think you can probably support yourself with like a bio-individual multivitamin that's kind of addressing those issues. If that's what you want to do because of the environment or socially, whatever, great, go for it. I don't think there's anything like long-term, like terribly wrong about veganism. Keto, I think is an interesting tool, a metabolic tool for correcting a lot of blood sugar issues. Genetically, I run really hot on blood sugar. So, I run like almost pre-diabetic levels. I have really good blood sugar control. So I don't spike, I don't move a lot, but I just run hot. So one of the reasons why I like keto is because like, it's one of the few times when I'm strict keto for 3+ months, it's one of the few times where I can drop my blood sugar into a kind of a stable range that's like normal. So from an A1C standpoint, it's interesting to use. I think it's like a tool to use a couple times a year to kind of like, you know, reset some of these kind of like blood sugar control mechanisms in the body. So it's again, like, it's one of those things like, what am I trying to do right now? And that's going to determine how I eat. Now, right now, this moment, my buddies have all been like, let's gain 20 pounds. I know that's a weird thing to do. So we all now
in muscle or just in general?
Muscle. Yeah. Not ideally muscle. It won't be 20 pounds of pure muscle, but it will hopefully be
not like it's the holidays. Let's see what kind of damage we can do.
Let's see who can get the biggest belly in the next 2 months. No, so we're just like, let's do it. Let's try to like kind of push our bodies and do some like cool like athletic challenges and stuff. Like we just did a time trial. There's this trail down in Colorado Springs. It's called the Manitou Incline, and it's 0.8 miles. But it's just straight up the side of a hill. It's actually old railroad tracks. And so you're just walking up railroad ties. And someone like Apollo Ono, the skater, the Olympic skater, he currently holds the world record for it. It's just one of those like grueling feats of like athleticism that a lot of people do. And because the Olympic Training Center is in Colorado Springs, a lot of Olympians train on the Manitou Incline for like endurance. But it's just like, it's this grueling distance that like, it's 0.8 miles, which doesn't sound like a long time, but the average time to complete this is like 55 minutes for 0.8 miles. Cause I think the average incline is 45 degrees and it goes up to 68 degrees in some points. So you're literally on your hands and knees at some point, like crawling up this thing. So anyway, we went down and did that, and we're going to retest in a couple months. So anyway, we're just kind of in this like mindset of like, let's do something like cool with our bodies while we're still kind of young in our like late 20s. So while we're trying to gain muscle, I'm trying to lift a lot, and I add carbs in. I add carbs that kind of agree with me, just in terms of kind of like just stacking more calories into my diet. And that tends to be the easiest way on my digestive system. I still eat kind of like a balanced diet right now, but I'm sure after this happens, kind of as we move deeper into like ski season, I'll want to be a little bit like leaner. So, things like that. So I'll probably, do a little keto kick, things like that. But like, again, like it doesn't have to be, I guess my message here is it doesn't have to be as like strict as like, I'm going to do a keto kick. It can just be like, oh, I'm going to, manipulate my macros in a way that makes sense for my body. And it doesn't have to even be like, I'm going to sit here with a spreadsheet and like track my macros and things like that. It's really just like kind of, I think what like registered dietitians like to use a lot nowadays is like intuitive eating. Which I I don't even know.
Which actually scares a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'm sure it does. It's just kind of one of those things, I guess, where assess what your goal is, develop a very simplistic plan on how you're going to get there, and then try to kind of do it, I guess, is the thing. So I kind of swing from a whole bunch of different strategies based on what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. And I think like intuitive eating, which is wonderful in theory, and I think it's a great concept, and it can be applicable for many different types of people. Like a lot of the times I hear it in the context of someone who's struggled with orthorexia, disordered eating, or even a more extreme eating disorder like anorexia. They use it as a tool in order to better their relationship with food, and just kind of eat what they want, but be more present in the eating process. I think not like numbing out and just kind of using it as a drug, so to speak. But I think the way that you mentioned it is really interesting because, I mean, clearly you're a wealth of knowledge, especially in terms of what nutrition works for you and your body in any given time. So I think it's not like intuitive eating for you. You would just kind of like throw all of that by the wayside. You would just kind of use that you have to kind of guide your meals on a daily basis, which I think is just a really powerful ability to have.
Yeah, and that transitions into something that really frustrates me with a lot of people that are in the wellness and health space, is that like a lot of the people that you're listening to on podcasts, so we'll just say for me, for example, like I have just an absurd amount of knowledge about my own body and about biochemistry and about biology and about all sorts of things that allow me to make these kind of like snap decisions very easily, right? Yeah. So I can talk about things like this, like, oh, I'm going to do this. And like, I immediately know that my goal is X. And in order to get to X, I'm going to do this, this, and this, right? But like the average person doesn't know that. They don't have that kind of, so like, it's really frustrating, I think, when people talk like, oh, it's super easy, just like eat differently to meet your goals. And the average person is like sitting there scratching their head, like, but like, how do I eat differently? Like, so I want to make that very clear. Like you have to know what you're doing in order to do things. And so like I would encourage people to take like a brief course, like on Coursera or something, one of these free classes on nutrition, just to get like very basic understandings of nutrition, or like read a book on sleep, like a Matthew Walker book on sleep, or just like any of these like very basic things that you can fit into your life. Spend 30 minutes a day for a week on nutrition, and you're going to set yourself up for like really understanding how to eat for the rest of your life, things like that, or work with a coach or work with your doctor or whoever it may be, whatever the relationship may be, just to make sure you're doing things correctly. I always like to point that out, because like, it's very easy for me to come on here and be like, oh yeah, I do this, it's easy, but that doesn't often translate to the real world and how a lot of other people are struggling. The second thing I want to point out is like, I think one of my favorite things, at least in terms of nutrition, that I've ever heard is, I think a lot of people have this relationship where it's like, I have eaten this, I now need to exercise to like to burn it off, right? So it's this kind of like food first, exercise is like the correction of the food they just ate. The way I like to think of it is like, you eat like an athlete. So athletes flip it, right? They eat to fuel their performance, right? They don't train to reduce the calories of that day, right? So if you think about it from like a kind of a performance mindset, like I'm going to eat this food because I know it's going to set myself up to perform, whatever perform means for you. It doesn't have to mean deadlifting. It doesn't have to mean sprinting or running a marathon. Perform could mean thinking clearly. It could mean feeling good enough digestively that you want to go out with your friends and get a bite to eat or something like that. So like your performance can mean anything. So it's about how like thinking about food, like I want to eat this because I know it's going to make me feel well and perform well, whatever that means to you. It kind of flips the script on nutrition. And it makes you feel like less guilty about things. Like a lot of people, it's like this guilt relationship with foods. I ate bad. I now need to go slog away on the treadmill for an hour to like burn that off. That's just like such a terrible relationship with food and with health. So I'd like to kind of think about it differently.
Yeah, I mean, that just makes people miserable. And I think, when you were kind of talking about your nutritional philosophy, it became very apparent that it's almost like your love of fitness is what kind of guided your nutrition, if you will. I mean, it seems like they're very simultaneous, right? But kind of hearing you speak even more now, it's like, yes, you kind of eat in order to perform and have that bucket of your health, almost kind of as the front runner. And it's interesting because, speaking to what you said about like calories in, calories out, like it's a very archaic model. And relatively speaking, like fitness hasn't even been a thing for very long, right? Like I think like the first person, started running in like what, the 40s or 50s. Like I'm kind of pulling that from out of nowhere, but I mean, I feel as if this whole idea of fitness hasn't even been around that long. Whereas obviously everyone has had to eat since first man walked the planet. So it's cool to hear you say that about flipping the script because, and again, performance, I mean, that doesn't even have to be active. That can be like eating in order to maintain mental clarity so that you can get your job done, or eating so that you can have enough energy to chase your kids around on the playground. Like, and I think that people need to hear that because, again, it's something that the eating process is taken for granted. We do it 3 to 5 times a day, what have you. It's something that people like numb out on, or they watch TV, or they're distracted and they're not even paying attention. Which, I mean, it's such given my research and learning all about the power of the mind and the eating process, it's so important to be present. But, I think that is a great piece of advice for people, is to kind of think about it the other way around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's interesting what you just said about fitness, is how it's like not really been along for a long time. And like, at first I was thinking about that. I was like, that's an interesting concept. And then you just kind of think about like our traditional model of fitness is so new. Like, I think that's like the key thing is like before the 1900s, before really just like before modern era, you didn't need to go run on a treadmill or lift weights because you were spending 8 hours a day, like pulling turnips out of the ground on your farm. Right. It was just this, like, you were so incredibly into like fitness because it was like a way of life. You were working a farm, you were working manual labor, you were building things, you were doing all. And so like, really in the past 100 years, that's kind of where that's changed so much, is that like people aren't expending as much energy on a daily basis. They're not moving as much on a daily basis, that we have to kind of move to this model where you have to go head off to the gym for an hour in order to kind of like recover some of that energy expenditure that you're not getting because you're sitting on a seat working on a computer nowadays. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be, and like that, I guess that's kind of like one of my, if we're talking about pillars of health, like when it comes to exercise, like my thing is just do whatever makes you move that you enjoy. Like it doesn't have to be lifting weights. It doesn't have to be running marathons. Like if you live on a farm, it could be just tending to the animals and moving around. If you have a dog, it could be taking that dog on a little bit longer walk every day. Like I live out in the mountains, and like I chop wood a lot. Like, I take up
that's so cool.
Like, chop wood. And so it's just like it's just one of those things that like, it's very synonymous with like athleticism, just because you're moving your body in a way that is just not like sitting in a seat staring at a computer. And like, that's really all it takes from a fitness standpoint. Like anything that's going to get your heart rate up, anything that's going to activate your muscles for a prolonged period of time, you're good to go, as long as you do that fairly regularly.
Yeah. Makes me think of that tagline for Nike, where it's like, if you have a body, you're an athlete.
Yeah.
And, I think like the majority of Americans probably don't think that way about them. They're like, I didn't grow up playing sports, but it's like, yeah, if you have a body, you're meant to move it.
Exactly. Yeah. Just trying to, again, like flipping the script there. So in some way, like in nutrition, you flip the script from like, I'm a dieter to like, I eat for my performance, and like flipping the script. And athleticism, or being an athlete, is just that like if you're a human, you're meant to move. So do it in some way, whatever that means to you. Like everyone thinks that there's like right way to exercise. And like, that is just so incredibly false. Like there's no right way. It's just whatever gets you moving regularly. That's it.
Yeah. So I want to, talk about this term biohacking a little bit, because I think we've thrown that word around and it is kind of a buzzword. And, in theory, I kind of understand what it is, but I would love to get your take on it. And I'll be honest. Like when I look at your Instagram, I'm like, oh, he's a biohacker. And then I'm like, and I'm really glad he likes nut butter because I can't go a day without eating it. So can you kind of explain that, the concept of biohacking a little bit, for especially for someone who's never heard of it before?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess in its simplest form, biohacking is just, you flip it, it's hacking your biology. It's trying to figure out how to like manipulate your body to perform better in some aspect. And again, I'm using perform very loosely. It doesn't have to be athletic performance. It's just some benefit to you biologically, whether that's thinking clearer or having better blood sugar maintenance or losing weight or, you know, doing any of these things that people are trying to do, activate the mTOR pathway or inhibit the mTOR pathway to kind of, you know, do all sorts of different things. Like it gets really nitty gritty really quickly. I like to say I was a biohacker 5 years ago. I was like, oh yeah, Tye, what are you? I'm a biohacker. I like to experiment. I like to test. I like to try crazy things on my body to try to figure out what like works best for me. Nowadays, I wouldn't touch the word biohacker. It's just because it's too mainstream. There's too many people out there that are just doing things that are like so fringe that are like, it's not even like safe anymore. Like that was always kind of the thing about biohacking. It was like kind of this idea that traditional medicine has kind of failed you just in terms of what the approach was as far as like individualization. And then so biohackers said like, I'm going to try to figure it out myself. And it really kind of stemmed a lot from like software engineers and these data people that really just love crunching numbers and looking at large data sets and kind of picking out patterns. It's really interesting to see like that's a lot of the teams that are kind of leading the companies that are producing these really cool wearables and things like that they're data engineers. They're not actually like traditionally trained in health. So it's cool to see. But yeah, I mean, biohacking, it could mean anything and it can go from any end of the health spectrum. Like it could be nutrition, it could be stress management. There's a lot around sleep. Obviously there's a lot around like supplementation. There's a lot around kind of wearable tech and getting data sets out of, you know, heart rate variability and things like glucose monitoring. I use a CGM for a long time. I'm very familiar with CGM. It's a continuous glucose monitor. It's basically like a little thing you stick and it just reads your blood glucose every couple minutes. It's what diabetics use.
I've actually been very curious about that for myself because I do have a glucometer, and, you know, during stints of time where I'm super curious about my own blood sugar, and that's the foundation of my health coaching. And, you know, it's kind of like how Gratified even came to be. It's a food company based on blood sugar management, but I've always been very curious about the ones that you wear all the time. And it just like has a monitor that reads it continually day in, day out.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I have a lot of experience with these just because I used to volunteer at a type 1 diabetics camp for kids. So it was like a sports camp. And so so I was like a counselor, which means like I was like medically responsible for them. And I had like 10 little kids running around, and like they tended to come from lower income families, but not necessarily. So about half of them had CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, and the other half just did the finger prick glucometer method. But it was really cool to see kind of like when a lot of these kids are sedentary, coming out of just kind of like watch TV all day environment. So you throw them into a sports camp, you have them running around playing soccer and doing all these things, like just seeing what it took to maintain blood sugars that were healthy, and just kind of like all things like that. So I did that for 4 years or something. So I had a lot of experience with that, and that was mostly during college and then a little bit out of college. And then what's really cool is kind of this year was the first year that a lot of companies started coming out around consumer CGMs. So before, you had to have like a medical diagnosis, you had to have a script from a doctor to get a CGM, right? You had to have a medical reason because they're very expensive. They're thousands of dollars. And an insurance company doesn't want to pay thousands of dollars for just Joe Schmo having a CGM, right? So there's a couple companies, and one of them that I'm very close with, it's called Levels, Unlock Levels. They just came out with kind of a consumer CGM, and you basically go up, they're still in beta, they're still testing, but it's this really cool app. It's a bunch of like SpaceX and ex-Tesla engineers that have basically entered the healthcare space, and they're developing this app around CGMs. And so their whole thing, and this is a really cool kind of getting into this personalization space within the healthcare environment. But so again, back to CGMs. Yes, you put it on your arm. It just has this little tiny needle. You barely feel it. You put it on your arm, your stomach, your butt, whatever, and it just reads glucose all the time. And it syncs to your phone, and it's just like it just plots a graph. And they're kind of the new versions of these apps have trend analysis. So it can basically show if your blood sugar is like diving or if your blood sugar is like rising really rapidly. It can give you an alert and kind of tell you that like, and again, this was built for diabetics. So like if your blood sugar is plummeting, it would alert you like, hey, you need to eat carbs because like you're about to be hypoglycemic and have a lot of issues. But again, like this is now being moved from diabetics and kind of a medical diagnosis to the mainstream. So people can understand their own bodies and how the foods that they're putting in their mouth, how that's impacting their blood sugar. Because we know that the correlation between blood sugar, A1C, which is just basically a 90-day average of blood sugar, all of these things, the correlation between that and chronic diseases is just incredible, right? And so this company Levels, and there's a couple other companies out there, but they have this really cool app, and it just has this really cool trend analysis and allows you to plot foods, and you basically do all of this stuff to understand what different carbohydrate sources do to your blood sugar, or just meals in general. It doesn't have to be carbohydrates. And so their whole thing is like there's individuality around the glycemic index. And so when you think about the glycemic index, which is kind of like the average impact of a food on your blood sugar, their basic thesis is that is an average of the population, right? So it's going to be some sort of a bell-shaped curve, and that the average is that this banana might have this glycemic index, but this banana might impact person A dramatically different than person B. So it's about kind of experimenting with carbohydrate sources and understanding that a sweet potato might have a terrible implication on my blood sugar, but a white potato might not, or wheat may not, or, you know, whatever, corn or whatever it may be. And the idea is that kind of these different orientations of carbohydrate sources in terms of how they're bound to each other and different types of fibers that are associated with it. And then also different types of kind of like biochemicals that are in these compounds, how they're impacting the gut, how they're impacting how blood sugar is transferred into the bloodstream, how they're impacting all these different things. And so kind of this bio-individuality of different foods and understanding how they impact you. And the whole point is you strap this thing on your arm and you learn about your body for 6 months, a year, however long you want to do it. And then you can apply that knowledge to eat foods that are better for balancing your blood sugar. And so they're coming out of beta soon. Cool company. I don't have any affiliation with them, but just cool stuff they're doing. I met them through Rootine because it's kind of a partnership that we're trying to form. And like it's kind of going to talk a little bit about Rootine is it's an interesting concept, and just like you take a genetic test, you take a blood test, and it basically helps inform what nutrients your body needs. And like the genetics behind it it's so incredibly cool. Like I think one of the coolest things that has happened in the healthcare space is genetics, because, you know, 5-10 years ago, it was $20,000 to run a genetic test, right? And then 23andMe and Ancestry DNA came on the scene. They brought the price from like 1,000 down to 100. And now there's like other companies that are taking advantage of this. And so like we have really cool data sets and really cool understanding on how kind of like genetic variations, these very small, very common genetic variations, impact how your body absorbs, distributes, metabolizes, and excretes various nutrients. And so this idea that like, I think there's like a lot of research showing that like a standard multivitamin doesn't really do a whole lot for most people. Like it just doesn't do. And like the reason is because of bioindividuality, right? The reason is because like that iron in that multivitamin, it might be incredibly beneficial for one person, or it might literally be poisoning another person just based on HFE gene variation. And like things like, I mean, people that don't like understand like genetics, like lactose is the easiest one, right? The LCT gene, it basically turns on or turns off your ability to produce lactase, which digests lactose. Lactose is the sugar found in dairy. So based on this variation in this single gene will determine if you can or if you cannot digest dairy in your adulthood, right? So if you have lactose intolerance, it's most likely because of this gene. And like there's all sorts of the MTHFR gene that people talk a lot about that has to do with like the metabolism of folate. There's way more nuance in MTHFR and folic acid and methylfolate than people give credit for. So that's one of the things we spend a lot of time on. And just even like things like the VDR gene. If you have a variation in the VDR gene, you need 2 times more vitamin D than the average person. Like that's a massive increase, right? And like something like 11% of the population has this mutation. So like you think about how important like vitamin D is in things like immune response and COVID, right? That's a big hot topic right now. And then you think about 11% of the population, and then you think about the fact that almost everyone is deficient in vitamin D. And
Right.
then you think about the fact that 11% of the population has this mutation that means that they're doubly deficient if they're deficient. And then it's just like, it's like no wonder why we're struggling as kind of an industry to like provide optimal outcomes. It's because there's no personalization in supplementation and nutrition and all
Yeah.
sorts of things. And it's just like, and that's what, again, what kind of goes back to why I advocate people to get testing done on themselves. So they have, they're empowered, they have this information, and they have the ability to kind of take this information and apply it to their lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that so many people underestimate the power of that. And even someone who has, been in this industry for years, and it's like you don't necessarily always think about the genetic component behind like the way that you process foods or different vitamins, minerals, et cetera. And exactly to reiterate what you said, information is power. And that's why these blanket approaches do not work. And, I think that to be able to gain that information for someone could be super empowering to help them make the best decisions for themselves. And then that would just kind of clear the confusion right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's just, that's why I'm excited to work in this industry, because it's like the intersection of like biochemistry and technology, and all it's doing is benefiting the consumer. Because in the next, like, it is just still super new right now, just in terms of like, there's not a lot of products on the market that are doing this sort of biometric personalization. But in 5 years, everyone's going to be doing it, because it's going to be that impactful. Like the outcomes that come out of having a food plan, or having a supplement, or having a, I don't know, sleep sensor, like whatever it may be, that is personalized to your body is going to kind of really, it's going to break the ceiling wide open in terms of kind of like what we can do for the consumer as a healthcare industry.
Yeah. So with your company Rootine, is there a coaching element that goes along with the test results, or is it kind of like, here are the test results?
Yeah. So like right now we typically have, so yes and no. So we basically have a DNA test, a blood test, and then there's a lifestyle component, right? So we take those 3 data points, they'll go into our algorithm. It weighs kind of your biometric data against like 400 peer-reviewed studies, and then generates like a unique nutrient output. Now, another thing we do is kind of, that's like considered nutrigenetic science. We also have nutrigenomic science, which is kind of like more of like a macronutrient, like what foods you should or should not be eating composition. So like that's an output that can be done from the DNA test as well. And we do have a coaching component with that as well, just to kind of guide people through it, because it's a really intense report. Like it's a 120-page report that comes out of that. And obviously the average person, that's very overwhelming. So we do kind of offer a health coaching in terms of engaging people and helping them walk through the report and understand like kind of how to make this data actionable. But and like the sky's the limit. Like we're thinking about personalized cosmetics and skincare, because there's a huge genetic component to that. There's a lot of really cool companies right now in kind of the personalized microbiome space. I think that research is still a little shaky, but like there's insane amounts of research being done on the microbiome. So in the next year or two, we're going to have a much better understanding than we do now in terms of how to kind of manipulate the microbiome, and understanding like what types of fibers help some people and what types of fibers don't help some people, and what types of microbes should be introduced or shouldn't be introduced depending on the person, and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool science coming out of this whole space, and how you can really manipulate. It all comes down to like biohacking. Like I wish that term wasn't like usurped and taken from us, because it's a really cool term, but it's now just too mainstream. We got to find something.
Maybe you could create and coin a new one. Maybe it'll come to you. Well, this is all very inspiring, and I think that it's super fun to just kind of like nerd out on, right? And, and to sort of like, so many people I think are so not in tune with their bodies, nor do they want to be. It's almost something like, especially with a history of a poor body image or what have you, or health crisis. And it's something that they almost kind of want to like sweep and not even think about. But I think that, we live in a really cool time where hopefully that will begin to shift, and more people will sort of want to have this mindset of, I'm going to take control of my own health and learn and educate myself, especially with my own individual physical body, and, take matters into their own hands in that way.
And like, I think the other thing is, what I kind of want to end that like personalization and personalized health conversation with is like, it doesn't, because it's there, it doesn't mean you have to have it, right? Like this is kind of like the far end of the spectrum in terms of like what you could be doing for your health. Like it's not cheap, it's time intensive, things like that. Like there's a lot of stuff to be going on here. And like that will improve over the years. So if you're someone that's just starting your health journey, or you don't have, a couple $100s to spend on testing and things like that, it doesn't mean you can't have real actionable changes in your life from like simple choices. Like getting back to kind of gratified, like choosing that bar on a daily basis or a weekly basis, like making that your kind of like snack or your food that you're going to take traveling with you versus something else. Like, I'm not going to call out any companies, but
I know we might be thinking, I know
any of the more sugary kind of more mainstream companies, like if you just like very simple changes like that, like choosing one bar over another bar, or choosing it's just choices at the end of the day, like trying to make better choices as often as you can, not to the point where it becomes a burden or restrictive or just painful to do, but just making very smart, very small choices repeatedly is going to really add up to meaningful changes in your health and life.
For sure. And I would even just take that a step further and say the choices that might have the more longer term benefit than the ones that satisfy the immediate need for gratification, because I think that is where so many people get stuck, is that they don't, this is a term I used in my health coaching. It was like, play the whole tape. Like clearly humans like that instant gratification, and whereas you might feel relief or positive emotions in the short term, like in the first 5 seconds, 5 minutes, like later on down the road, even if that's just like 15 minutes, an hour later, that choice didn't serve you. So it's being your own advocate in that way, and your own cheerleader, so to speak, to sort of make those choices that are going to benefit you, longer term.
And that comes down to kind of like the goal-oriented healthcare. Like have a goal, like put a goalpost out there that you're trying to work towards. And then it's much easier to make, the not like simple sugary reward kind of, because it's like right there and that, like right there, it's like, oh, this is amazing. But then like you look at the goalpost and you're like, darn, I messed up. Versus like if you're always looking at that goalpost, like this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, it's much easier to kind of like make the healthy choice because it's taking one step further towards that goalpost.
All right. So I have only a few more questions. I want to respect your time. I could talk to you for hours. But okay, so we're about to enter the holiday season. Yes. So just your thoughts on like sweets or desserts of any kind, splurges, if you will, and alcohol. Just curious for your thoughts.
Good. My dog is right here. He's a husky.
I know. I love that. Dogs are welcome.
He's gonna, let me just let him out really quick. I'm gonna be
right? Okay, sure.
All right, I'm back. He's a very vocal husky. So he will start climbing on me and like moaning and so you want to do that. I think around the holiday season, it's obviously very easy to kind of fall into these traps. I don't think it's wrong to fall into the traps every once in a while. Like, I don't think it's wrong to indulge a couple times, but I think the key is kind of like picking and choosing where you indulge and not indulging on everything, right? Like it's very easy to start on Tuesday night on like Thanksgiving weekend. I know it's past Thanksgiving at this point, but like it's very easy to start eating and drinking alcohol and sugary stuff and super high fatty stuff, super high calorie stuff on Tuesday night. And then you do that Wednesday morning, and then you do that Wednesday night, and then you do it Thursday. And then and like, it just kind of builds onto this just like massive crescendo of just poor choices throughout like a couple of days. And it's like, I think it's just like, how can you mitigate some of those choices and kind of the bad decisions and just pick and choose, right? So in terms of things that I do, again, like it's kind of like isolating, like if I'm going to drink, I'm going to drink like one night, it's not going to be like a multi-night thing. I'm going to try to drink in moderation. I'm not going to go throw back like 15 beers or something. Like this isn't college anymore. So just trying to do things in moderation and trying to pick one day to do them on or one meal to do them on. And it doesn't mean that you have to be like the Scrooge or the Grinch sitting in the corner, like shaking your finger at people that are eating cookies or whatever. Like, it's just kind of be present, say hello to everyone, hang out with your friends and family. It's so important this time of year. And hopefully you get to hang out with your friends and family with COVID and everything. But it's just trying to pick and choose and not make recurring poor choices, like day in, day out, meal in, meal out. I think it's a big thing. At the end of the day, like, the research is very clear that one really big poor meal has no impact. A week from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 years from now, no impact. So like people that get really hung up on things like that, like they get so down on themselves. Like, oh my gosh, I ate this or I drank that, and like, I'm just ruined forever. And it's just like, it has no impact a week from now or 2 weeks from now. So just enjoy yourself, but try to have some stops here and there and try to pick and choose, and know that one big meal or one night of more than one drink type thing is not going to really impact you down the road. So that's the kind of what I would say. Enjoy it, but don't go crazy.
Yeah. Moderation. That's a good message.
Yeah.
Too.
And I think exercise, like, I know that the turkey trot and like all that stuff, like, that's a good way to kind of like gear up for, like, if you're going to have a big meal, like, don't wake up, roll out of bed, sit on the couch in your pajamas, and then just like blow out like a 5,000 calorie meal. Like, move, go like, and get some friends involved. Like, even if it's just kind of like walking around, walking the dogs, or maybe it's doing like a pre-meal run, or maybe you're going to get your buddies together and you're just going to destroy a workout for 2 hours and then pig out. Like, that's always better than just pigging out. Right. So kind of just mitigating that a little bit.
Yeah, I once got asked, I contributed to this article a couple of years ago. It was about Thanksgiving specifically. And they're like, well, how do you stay balanced on Thanksgiving Day? And, I was like, I really don't treat Thanksgiving as very different. Like, it's not like I don't eat until 5 p.m., 6 p.m. and then just go, all out. It's like, my Thanksgiving dinner is actually the same size as all of my other dinners. I mean, you might be eating like more high fat, casseroles, and of course I'm going to have some pie, but it's like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, I'm going to eat until I can't like button my pants. And it's just like, you still like, it's more enjoyable that way. And I think the same thing with the holidays, like, pre-COVID, there's probably more circumstances where you're going to indulge, like more parties and things like that, where there's going to be probably more drinking and, sugar cookies or what have you. But, I really don't think that that's something that you need to like do every single day, just because in between Thanksgiving and New Year's, just because it's the holiday season. Like, I think that you can kind of treat it the same and, still maintain your fitness routine or what have you, and, eat until you're satisfied, but not overly stuffed. I think just little things like that can make it so that come January 1st, you're not feeling like you have to get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's like a lot of different strategies here for different types of people. Cause like I am the type of person, I like to just eat until I can't stand up anymore. Like, that is the type of person I am. Like, one of the things.
Yeah, but then you're going to be climbing up a mountain the next day.
Right. So like, one of the things I loved is when I did a couple different DNA tests, like I've always been like that. I'm just like, you put food on the table, I will eat it. Like, guaranteed, no limit, kind of like bottomless stomach type person. When I was like a little young kid, my best friend's parents, they nicknamed me fondly the garbage disposal. It's like, because I would come over to the house and like, it was just like, they'd be finishing up dinner and I'd be like, is that available?
That's awesome.
Never have any leftovers because I was there. But so like, that was one of the cool things I learned from my genetic test. I actually have a genetic variation that like makes my like satiety mechanisms like less. So like, I don't get as full as quickly as other people. Again, it's due to genetics. So like, that's just a cool thing I learned. But so like, one of the things you can do is if you are someone that just likes to eat until they can't stand up anymore, maybe you don't eat before that. Like, right. It's like, so maybe you do something like OMAD, like only one meal a day, but like, I wouldn't recommend that all the time. But like, maybe that's your kind of key, because you know that if you're going to eat breakfast, lunch, and then blow out a dinner, like that's going to be a pretty heavy day on calories. So maybe you just skip breakfast and lunch, because then you kind of can't overeat, because if you're only going to eat one meal, like there's only so much food you can fit inside your body. Like maybe that's a strategy for you. But then again, like another person, maybe it does make sense to eat kind of a moderate sized, high protein breakfast and lunch, because it's going to keep you fuller. So it's going to prevent you from wanting to overeat the dinner. Again, it's kind of like knowing your body, knowing what you like to do. Maybe that's a better strategy for you. And like, I think that at the end of the day, if I was going to give like one tip of advice, I don't think there's really any advice to be given around these sorts of meals. I think people that overanalyze it, it's just like, what are you doing? Like, just live your life, make smart decisions. But if I was to give one tip of advice, it'd be like, focus on the protein. Eat more of turkey and less of the stuffing and the mashed potatoes, because the turkey is going to fill you up. That protein is going to kind of like kick in some of these satiety mechanisms, and it's going to fill you up. You're going to feel full faster. And it's going to be a lower calorie option. So, protein is just in general kind of a good go-to. So if you're going to overeat anything, I would overeat the protein versus kind of the sugars and the carbs and the fats and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice. Okay, so I only have a couple more questions, and I do want to touch really fast on the stress management pillar, and just kind of hear your thoughts and what you do for your own stress management techniques.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest stress management thing that I do is sleep. This is one of those things that, like, again, the kind of the nuance, like if you don't know a lot about sleep and you don't know a lot about stress, you don't understand that it's the biggest negative feedback loop that you can have. Right. So if you get poor sleep, then you're going to feel more stress during the day, specifically if you don't get that kind of like late morning sleep. So from like, I can't remember the exact times, but it's like 3 a.m. to like 6 or 7 a.m. is when you get most of your REM sleep. And that REM sleep it's kind of like a mood reset. There's been a lot of research showing that like getting optimal REM sleep is really good for like controlling your emotions, and it gives you a much more kind of like stable mood throughout the day and things like that. So I really focus on it. And of course my dogs love to wake me up at 5 in the morning. Like, we're hungry, like, let's go. But I always try to optimize my sleep kind of in the late morning, because it helps me stabilize my mood. It makes me more apt to exercise, which is another stress reduction technique. It makes me kind of just, again, that like stable mood makes me able to handle things better. I got a lot on my plate with running my own business and working for Rootine and all sorts of things like that. So like, it helps me, manage things and just keep a positive outlook. So, and then of course the other thing is like, when you are stressed, especially when you're stressed in like the afternoon and the evening, that's going to increase your cortisol levels, and cortisol is a huge brake pedal on sleep. So if you have high cortisol levels in the evening, it's going to be very hard to fall asleep. You're going to be tossing and turning. Even if you do fall asleep, you're not going to be getting good sleep. Right. So again, like, that's kind of my big thing here. I'm definitely like a type A personality. I am very like controlling in terms of how I like things being done. So like, I definitely do struggle with stress. So it's always like, I'm not good at meditating. I'm not good at like some of these classic strategies that people talk about a lot. And so sleep is really the big lever that I try to pull as much as I can. And then it kind of like, and then this conversation devolves into exercise. Like, it's much easier for me to fall asleep if I've exercised during that day. So like this is like a big snowball. Like, lifestyle is like, you can't just pick one thing. Like, if you want to start and you're just a beginner, pick one thing. Don't get overwhelmed with nutrition and stress and sleep and all these sorts of things. Right. But at the end of the day, these things all play into each other. Like, stress, sleep, exercise, and nutrition, like they're not individual pillars. It's more like a web, like a spider's web, like, right. You pull in one spot and they're all kind of shifting. So it all kind of comes together. I think another thing with stress is just like just planning, having a list, I think is really important. If you have a lot of things to do, writing them down and checking them off one by one, I think is incredibly powerful. 2, just like planning ahead. Like, I work from home. I always have. So I don't really like commute or anything, but if you do commute, if you like find that if you're always like sitting in traffic, like freaking out, like, I'm not going to make it to work on time, leave earlier. Like, try to do some like little planning things that are going to take these stressors out of your life. And the big thing that has been like kind of like revolutionary for a lot of people that I've worked with is a stress audit. You basically sit down and you spend 20 minutes and you just try to clear your head, and you try to like put yourself out of your body. Like, look at yourself as if you were one of your best friends looking at you, and say like, what are the things that are stressing this guy out? It's like, what is stressing Tye out the most? Like, write down 10 things, right? That is the biggest stressors on your life. I guarantee you there are like 3 or 4 that you can just cross out. Just like, I'm done with this. Like, maybe it's a person, maybe it's like someone that's just like, if they're stressing you out that much, like, either fix it or move on. There's too many like really cool people in this world to like let someone like negatively impact your life like that much. And then there are other things that I think you can like, once you cognitively like look at that piece of paper and you're like, wow, that is the thing that is causing me this much stress. So many people just kind of like wade through life stressed out, but they don't really know what's stressing them out. So I think once you kind of like identify what it is, it's so much easier to solve it. once you have that word on that piece of paper, it's like, wow, this is attainable. I can do this. I can solve this problem. And it's the number one thing on my list. Like, imagine how great that would feel to like, I'm stressed out all the time. This is the one thing that's causing me the most stress, and I just solved it. Like, so I think that's one of those things, just being kind of like cognizant of what it is that is causing you issues, and being proactive about solving it. And
they might even realize, I love that, because they might even realize that they're all stories, right? Like a lot, like I love that quote. I can't remember who to attribute it to, but it's like, oh, I've lived like 100 crises in my life and like 0 have actually happened. And so it's like a lot of the times we're telling us these stories that, make us more stressed out than we need to be. Like, take that example of being late to work. It's like, you're stressed out that you're late to work because of something that you're telling yourself about said situation that might not even come to fruition at all. So if you can kind of like, this is where I like the hindsight perspective. And I think that experience and getting older really helps with this, especially with those big ticket items in life. And it's like, okay, I've been here before. Like, did I get fired, or did the world explode? And it's like, no, like, you're late and it happens, and everything's fine. So I think I love that pen to paper and sort of determining what it is. And then you either like take action, or you understand that it's not something that serves you anymore. And it's a thought that can go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of people live in stress due to internal narratives. They're just telling themselves like these stories in their head that don't translate to what anyone else is thinking or what the actual situation is. And it's just not a good space to be in. And like, I think having that third person mentality, being able to step outside of your own body and like, kind of like look at yourself and say like, does this matter? Like, cause like so many times, like you said, like you got fired, like that is like a huge thing, right? Like that's a massive impact on your life. But at the end of the day, it might not have any impact. It might even set you up for a better job somewhere else. So like, it's one of those things, like kind of removing yourself from the situation, saying like, does this immediately impact my health, well-being, or like ability to live? And if the answer is no, then you should just push the stress aside and try to be proactive about how to like improve the situation.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So my last question that I actually ask everyone, because I'm fascinated with morning routines and I love to ask people about theirs. So Tye, what is your morning routine?
Good question. So my morning routine is wake up, get woken up by the dogs. I go downstairs. I will usually feed them, let them out, and then I sometimes try to go back to bed. So it depends on what time I get woken up at. If it's like 4:30, I go back to bed because that REM sleep is very important to me. If it's like 5:30 or 6, I usually just get up. Because I'm mountain time, a lot of the people I work with are East Coast, so it's actually better to get up and just kind of work with them. So aside from that kind of boring bit of the morning, I'm big on espresso. I really like caffeine and coffee. I love the taste. I'm a hyper metabolizer of caffeine. Again, back to genetics. And so one of the cool things I learned, those people tend to consume a lot more caffeine than the average person because they metabolize it so much faster. And there's other drugs that are kind of in this pathway as well. So I metabolize those drugs much faster. And so I have like 5, 6, 7 shots of espresso per day.
Wow.
And that's just because like, I like the taste. I think there's a lot of health benefits associated with caffeine and coffee.
Have you ever done, sorry to interrupt you, have you ever done the bulletproof coffee stuff?
I did for a little while. I've never been huge on padding calories into anything. Like I think there's very easy ways to get calories, especially from fat, in a way that is much more nutritious than dumping a bunch of like MCT or butter into coffee. I also just didn't really love the taste of it. So that was just another factor there. I don't think it kind of is, it's neither here nor there for me in terms of like what the benefits are. I think if it works for you, it works for you. It really depends on kind of what the MCT is that you're using. If you're using like C8, probably pretty good. If you're using like the C10 or C12, it's probably pretty useless. If you kind of get into like butyrate mechanisms and like kind of repairing the gut lining and things like that, that could be pretty impactful. I think there are actually a lot of now bioengineered butyrate molecules that you can just take in a capsule. So I would probably prefer that over like a ton of calories. Again, just because I think at the end of the day, like there are so many like cool, fun ways to get calories. Like why would you drink a coffee with 500 calories? Like why wouldn't you allocate that to like good food with nutrition or like hanging out with your friends or something like that? So I've never been big on that, but I I'm really big in like kind of just moving in the morning. I think that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
important for like kind of setting your circadian rhythm. And that's, again, going to allow you to get to sleep later that night.
Mm-hmm.
So just something like brief and kind of bursty I like to do in the morning, like activity wise, whether that's just
Mm-hmm.
like as many push-ups as I can until I fail and then I'm done, or just like squats, or like chopping down a tree, or like just running up and down the hill with the dog.
Yeah.
Just something quick. It's not like an hour workout. It's like I've got a bunch of stuff to do in the morning, so I want to just like activate my body and then get on with it. So that's kind of where like the coffee and like the burst of activity comes in. And then anytime there's like a time change, I have a circadian light. It's just basically just like a light that sits on your desk. It's really bright and it just blasts you with light, and it kind of helps set that circadian rhythm again, which I think is pretty powerful. It definitely helps me kind of like when there's that time change, or when I like change time zones or something like that. Definitely useful. And then the big thing for me in terms of like actual habits is creating a list of things I need to do that day. And then like trying to really quickly as fast as I possibly can, getting through like a lot of like the meaningless tasks. So a lot of people have different strategies here. Some people think they like work best in the morning creativity. So they push off those meaningless tasks towards like the middle of the afternoon when they kind of have this like slump. That's when they want to like go through emails or whatever. I like to do stuff right away because, again, I'm one of these like type A persons where like if I have something that needs to be done, it just kind of like ruminates in my head. It's like, Tye, you got to do this. Tye, you got to do this. That email. So like I like to just blow all that stuff out really quickly and then move on to kind of the more like thought-provoking, creative tasks that I have to do that day. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. Very cool. And I think, the caffeine and the movement in the morning, I'm right there with you. A lot of people would agree. No, so this has been great. We didn't really talk about Bare nut butter at all, which is kind of, which is where I was like thinking the conversation was going to go, but no, this has been fascinating. And you are just a wealth of knowledge in terms of health, wellness, fitness, all the things. So like I said, I could speak to you for hours more, but I'll respect your time, and I just appreciate this so much. And I know that there's some amazing nuggets of information people can just pick from this conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I hope people can find some useful tidbits here and there. I'm happy to do this again. If you ever want to chat again, there's a lot to talk about and a lot of kind of cool stuff to go through. So I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been amazing to see your business grow. And I, hope we can continue to support that with Bare Nut and all those things.
For sure. I will just say, I'm so excited about the peanut butter. I am a peanut butter fiend, and if there's going to be a gratified product with peanut butter, so help me. So very excited about that. So before we hop off, where can people find you?
Well, I used to be big on Instagram, but like kind of like the whole biohacking scenario, the whole keto vegan, I like to be ahead of the times a little bit. So like when things become mainstream, I'm just like, never mind. So I kind of don't really get on Instagram that much anymore. But if you want to contact me on Instagram, it's just at Tye Jensen. Tye is spelled Tye. You can also just email me if you have anything related to like nut butter products. It's hello@barenutbutter.com, and you can just check us out at barenutbutter.com, and it's BARE. Bare, not like the animal, but bare as in like we don't put anything else in the products other than nuts and salt. So you can check us out there. And then if you want anything like health related, or you want to learn more about like kind of the personalized health space, or have any questions about that, you can reach out to me at like rootine.co. So that's just Tye@rootine.co. And again, happy to answer any questions there, connect you with anyone you need to be connected with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been fabulous, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Same.
We'll be in touch. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.